We all know wildfires are bad, right? Like devastating. But what if I told you the danger doesn't just stop when the flames go out?
Interesting.
Yeah, today we're going deep on the hidden health hazards of wildfires, the dangers that stick around long after the smoke clears,
Oh, wow.
And we're using an episode of the Hidden Hazards podcast to guide us. And let me tell you, it's pretty eye-opening.
I bet.
They dug into this specific case, the Marshall Fire. Happened in Colorado back in 2021.
Oh, right. Yeah.
This fire was just awful. Over 1,000 homes destroyed, $2 billion in damage.
Wow.
But here's where it gets kind of crazy. People who were miles away from the burned areas, they started having these weird symptoms months later.
Really?
Yeah, it's wild.
So the Marshall Fire, that's a really interesting case to look at. It shows just how sneaky wildfire smoke can be. Like at first, people in these areas that weren't even burned, they were reporting, itchy eyes, headaches, nagging coughs. Some even had nausea. It was really baffling for doctors. Seemed like some mystery illness.
Yeah, it's like a health crisis unfolding in slow motion.
Right.
Just out of thin air, literally. So what is it about wildfire smoke that makes it so dangerous, even in places where the fire didn't even reach?
Well, the danger lies in something called PM 2.5. You probably heard of it.
Yeah.
These are microscopic particles, super tiny, like 30 times smaller than the human hair.
Wow.
Now, obviously, we breathe in dust and other particles all the time.
Right.
But these PM 2.5 particles, they're so small, they can actually sneak past your body's natural defenses.
Oh, no.
And they go deep into your lungs.
It's like these tiny invaders just slipping past security. And I'm guessing it's not just a cough we're talking about here.
Definitely not. The latest research is showing that if you're exposed to PM 2.5 for a long time, it can really increase your risk of some serious stuff.
Like what?
Heart disease, stroke, even cognitive decline later in life.
Oh, wow.
These particles, they cause inflammation all over your body. And there's more and more evidence linking them to like a whole bunch of chronic diseases.
That's really disturbing. And the fact that the smoke can travel, what, hundreds of miles?
Hundreds of miles, yeah.
So even if you don't live near an area that's prone to wildfires, you could still be at risk.
That's a really important point. The American Lung Association, they've been keeping track of this.
Right.
Their data is showing that thousands of hospital visits every single year are linked to being exposed to wildfire smoke.
Seriously?
Yeah. And, it's even worse. Their research also suggests that some groups, like children and older folks, they're especially vulnerable to the long-term effects.
So it's not just about being close to the fire itself. You got to think about the wind patterns, how that smoke can affect air quality way beyond the immediate fire zone. Makes you think, where you live, how close you are to those fire-prone areas.
Yeah, definitely. It's smart to be aware of your surroundings. And, even if you're lucky enough to have your home escape the flames, there are still hidden dangers.
Wait, so you're saying even if my house survives a wildfire, I could still be at risk? That's scary.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's true. When I first learned about this, it was a real eye-opener for me.
Really?
Think about it. After a fire, ash and soot settle everywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
They get into your vents, they coat everything, they even seep into your water supply.
No way, the water too.
Yeah. So even if your house looks fine, these microscopic particles, they're still releasing harmful stuff long after the fire's out.
You're kidding.
We're talking about things like benzene, a known carcinogen, getting into the water. Remember those mysterious illnesses we were talking about?
Yeah.
The ones after the Marshall Fire?
Yeah.
Well, researchers, they started testing homes that looked totally fine from the outside, no fire damage.
Okay.
And what they found was really high levels of volatile organic compounds, VOCs, in the air and the water.
In the air and water.
Yeah. These VOCs, they can cause all sorts of problems. Headaches, fatigue, skin irritation, breathing issues, the whole works.
It's incredible how something you can't even see can have such a big impact on your health.
It really is.
Yeah.
And what's even more worrying is that we still don't fully understand the long-term consequences of being exposed to these VOCs. We're really just scratching the surface of this research.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Like a hidden health crisis, and we're only just starting to figure out, how bad it really is. But you know what? Let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about something that often gets forgotten after a disaster. Mental health.
Oh, that's a good point. We've been talking a lot about the physical effects, but the emotional toll of a wildfire, that can be just as bad, right?
Absolutely. Like losing your home.
Yeah.
Losing your community. That feeling of security just gone.
It's got to be just awful.
The trauma of that, it can be so deep. It can lead to anxiety, depression, even PTSD.
I can't even imagine. It's one thing to read about it, but to actually go through something like that?
It's a whole different world. And unfortunately, mental health support, it's often like the last thing people think about in disaster response.
Really?
There's still this stigma around asking for help.
Oh, yeah.
And resources. They can be hard to come by.
Yeah.
Especially in rural areas.
That's just not right. It seems like we need a better approach to disaster recovery. One that takes care of both the physical and the emotional needs of people, you know?
Totally agree. We need to create this culture where asking for help with mental health is normal.
Yeah.
Not just after a disaster, but like all the time.
Yeah, just part of life.
Exactly. It's like we need to build up our mental resilience the same way we prepare our homes for a fire.
Oh, I like that.
Right. And that means, putting money into mental health services.
Okay.
Training first responders to spot the signs of trauma.
Right.
Building community support networks that can provide care for the long haul.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot, but it's obvious we can't ignore the mental health side of these disasters.
No, we can't. Now, okay, switching gears again, I think it's important to talk about like what we can actually do to protect ourselves.
Okay, yeah. Let's get practical. What are some things people can do to lower their risk?
Well, one of the most important things, stay informed about air quality.
Right. Makes sense.
Get yourself a good air quality monitor for your home, especially if you live in an area where fires are common.
So you can keep track of the PM 2.5 and other pollutants.
Exactly. That way you know when to, take steps to protect yourself.
Does that mean like having some N95 masks handy?
Oh, for sure. N95 masks are the best for filtering out those nasty particles. If you have to be outside during a wildfire, wearing a mask can really make a difference.
What about your home? Anything you can do to make it more resistant to smoke and ash?
Yeah, definitely. Making sure your windows and doors are properly sealed, that can help a lot in keeping the smoke out. You can also get like high efficiency air filters for your HVAC system.
Oh, right, to trap those particles.
Exactly.
Wow, I'm learning so much from this deep dive. There's so many things you can actually do.
And don't forget about your water. If you're in an area that's been hit by a wildfire, it's super important to have your water tested.
Oh, right, for contaminants.
Yeah, you might need to use bottled water or like get a filtration system until you're sure it's safe to drink.
Makes sense. Even if the fire didn't directly damage your home, you still have that risk from the ash and soot.
Right. And when it comes to mental health,
Yeah.
it's all about building up that resilience.
Okay.
Having a support system.
Yeah.
Family, friends, maybe a therapist, or even a support group.
Yeah, that's so important.
And I think having a plan, knowing what to do if there's a wildfire, that can help with the anxiety too.
Yeah, feeling like you have some control.
Exactly. Knowing what to do, where to go in an emergency, it can make a huge difference for how you feel.
So we've talked about what individuals can do, but what about the bigger picture? What needs to change, like as a society, to deal with this growing threat of wildfires?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's going to take a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
We need to rethink how we manage our forests.
Right.
How we build our homes, and how we tackle the root causes of climate change.
So let's break that down a bit. What kind of changes are we talking about for forest management?
Well, for one thing, we need to get on board with things like prescribed burns, being proactive about reducing the fuel for these fires.
Right, like intentionally setting fire.
Yeah, it might seem counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But it's actually really effective in preventing those huge catastrophic wildfires.
I remember learning about that, like fighting fire with fire.
Exactly. And we also need to think about how we build in areas that are prone to wildfires.
Okay.
Using fire-resistant materials, creating like defensible space around buildings.
Right.
Updating building codes to reflect the risk, that kind of stuff.
Makes sense. And then there's, climate change.
The big one, yeah.
The elephant in the room.
We can't ignore how climate change is making these fires more frequent and more intense.
Yeah.
Cutting back on greenhouse gas emissions, moving towards clean energy and sustainable practices, that's key to tackling the root cause.
That's a big conversation. And I think there's a lot of different opinions on the best way to deal with climate change.
There is, for sure. And it's important to acknowledge those different viewpoints. Yeah. But I think we can all agree on one thing.
What's that?
Climate change is a real problem, and it's happening now.
Right.
And we need to work together to fix it.
So where does that leave us? We've talked about the risks, the impacts, the possible solutions. What's the main message for our listeners?
Well, I think the main takeaway is this. Knowledge is power. The more we understand about the hidden dangers of wildfires, the better prepared we'll be.
Right. To protect ourselves, our families, our communities.
Right.
It really makes you think, This whole idea that the danger from wildfires, it's not just the flames, it's so much bigger than that. And, as we've been talking, it's kind of hit me. A lot of these issues, the air quality problems, the water contamination, the mental health strain, it's not just wildfires, is it?
You're absolutely right. It's like these are common threads that run through pretty much every kind of disaster.
Really?
Yeah. Hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, even man-made events like a chemical spill.
Oh, wow.
You often see the same things in the aftermath: displacement, environmental damage, long-term health impacts. It can go on for years.
That's a bit scary to think about. It makes you wonder, how do we even begin to prepare for a future where these events are becoming more and more common?
Yeah.
It feels like we need a whole new way of thinking about resilience, both as individuals and as a society.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. We need to shift away from this reactive mindset and get more proactive. That means investing in things like preparedness measures, strengthening our infrastructure, and developing those comprehensive disaster response plans, ones that not only address the immediate needs, but also look at long-term recovery.
So it's not just about putting out the fire, it's about rebuilding in a way that makes us less vulnerable next time.
Exactly. We have to design our communities and systems with that resilience in mind.
What does that look like?
Well, things like diversifying our energy sources, protecting those natural buffers like wetlands and forests, and building strong social networks that can provide support when things go wrong.
It sounds like building resilience is about more than just physical infrastructure. It's about community, too, and shared responsibility.
You got it. When you invest in social capital, when people know their neighbors and have those strong bonds, they're so much better equipped to weather the storms, both literally and figuratively.
I'm definitely leaving this deep dive with a whole new perspective on wildfires. And not just wildfires, but any kind of disaster. It's not just about the immediate danger. It's the long game, the long-term consequences we got to be ready for.
I'm glad to hear that. And I hope our listeners feel empowered to learn more and take some action.
I hope so too. Knowledge really is power, especially in these situations. So to everyone listening, please share this with your friends and family, anyone who could benefit from this information.
Right. And if this deep dive has piqued your interest, we encourage you to keep digging. There's tons of information available online, at libraries, even right in your own community.
So true. Keep asking those questions, stay informed, and never stop learning. The more we know, the better prepared we'll be. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the hidden hazards of wildfires. Until next time, stay curious.